Good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Board of Directors of the Bellevue School District. Today is Thursday, August 17th, 2023, and the time is 4:30 p.m. At this time, we will do roll call.
Jane Norris.
Seema Sarafan.
Carolyn Watson.
Superintendent Kelly Aramaki.
Okay, thank you. This time, I will ask our Executive Director and Chief of Staff to the Superintendent, John Harrison, to please introduce this evening's speaker.
I would be happy to do that, President Sarafan. You may have noticed a gentleman hanging around behind the screen in the last couple of meetings. I call him TNJ, the new Jess. He actually has a real name, which is George Zorn, and he's a technology specialist, and he'll be taking over from Jess, because as you know, Jess has accepted a new position in communications. So I'm going to introduce you to George Zorn to be our staff speaker here this evening. George.
Great, thank you. If I may, I will call you George, but you're really Mr. Zorn. So nice that you're here. Would you be leading us into our Pledge of Allegiance as well as our land acknowledgement?
Absolutely.
Okay, we're going to follow your cue. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We acknowledge that we are on the indigenous land of the Coast Salish peoples who have reserved treaty rights to this land, specifically the Duwamish and Snoqualmie tribes. We thank these caretakers of this land who have lived and continue to live here since time immemorial. We reflect on the historic context that brings us to reside on this land and accept our responsibility to interrupt erasure. We commit to an ongoing partnership with the Snoqualmie tribe as we listen to, learn from, and lead with their guidance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think at this time, we look forward to hearing from you.
Yes, as you mentioned, my name is George. I am the new Central Tech Support Specialist for the district. I was previously at Tillicum Middle School as a technology specialist there. So this marks just about 1 year with the district, and I'm really happy to be here and excited to be supporting the board.
Well, we're excited and grateful you're here. I think I just want to tell everybody who's listening how important your role is. It helps us to not just run within the room, but also create the technological apparatus and support that allows us to have our meetings run live and be preserved for others to listen to later. So just want to welcome you and thank you. It's also a good time for us to maybe thank your soon-to-be predecessor, Jess Albrecht, who's been wonderful and whom we've greatly valued and appreciated. So you have big shoes to fill, but we are very excited for you to be here. So thank you.
Likewise.
Don't mess up.
Okay, well, at this time, I ask for a second to my motion to approve tonight's agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. If there's no discussion, at this time we'll vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay.
Sorry.
Aye. Okay.
Aye.
Okay. All right. The motion carries. Thank you. We now go to acknowledgements. In 2 days, it is August 19th. It will be World Humanitarian Day. So now we move to the consent agenda. I ask for a second to my motion to approve tonight's consent agenda. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none, I ask for your votes. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the motion carries. I know you had a comment, so go ahead.
I did want to make a comment because I like to say positive things when positive things happen. And I was on the consent agenda, we had that thing where we approved a whole lot of trips for kids who might win championships and have to go someplace, but we don't know for sure. And I will say, you know, numbers of years ago, we didn't do that. And like my kids' team won the championship to go to Pasco, and it was really questionable as to whether they could go because there was no board meeting, there was no approval, there was all that. So this is fantastic. Thank you all for figuring that out.
I think that's a thank you to the staff. So I appreciate that, and thank you for flagging that. We now move to item 3 on our agenda, which is our superintendent update. I look to Dr. Aramaki, please. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. If we could pull up my PowerPoint slides. We've got a lot to present on this morning. I'm going to go pretty fast. The majority of what I'm going to share is the kind of our annual plan summary, strategic plan summary. But there's just a couple things I wanted to touch on before that. So just first up, if you look at the slide that's up there on superintendent comments, those are pictures from our Leadership Institute last week. And we last week we brought all of our principals, assistant principals, district leaders, teacher leaders back. And we had an amazing time together. Director Watson was there with us. Thank you for joining us and participating in some of our breakout sessions and everything. But it was great. Our work around elevating student voice of what we've been seeing our kids doing here in the boardroom this past year in particular was a focus for us. So really bringing student voice into the school district is what our focus was. On our third day, we went to the CMAR Chicano Latino Museum of Culture. Larry Gossett was our guest speaker and talked about kind of the legacy of civil rights. And on that third day, we also launched our equity-driven decision-making, which was born out of kind of our critical criteria and the recommitment to equitable decision-making that we passed together in the spring. So I'm really excited about that. Next slide. The other thing I wanted to mention is we are expanding our family hub. So we started a family hub with Bellevue LifeSpring at Highland. And this coming fall, we are going to launch a second family hub at Stevenson Elementary School. We are thrilled about that. The hub provides families with rent and utility assistance, basic needs, connections to HopeLink, Bellevue Boys and Girls Club, legal assistance if needed. LifeSpring is hosting a back-to-school clothing event right now, they're planning to serve over 2,000 students where they will give $150 Amazon or Old Navy gift certificates or certificates to spend online. They've got volunteers from Amazon and Bellevue LifeSpring. They provide direct on-site support from Mary's Place, and then they're creating this new traveling hub, which is a van that they had purchased to bring resources directly to families who are in need. And so we're just so thankful again for Bellevue LifeSpring and for that partnership in supporting our families who are in need. Next slide. I shared about this earlier, but I know people are interested in kind of knowing what the conversation is going to look like around middle school enrollment and potential consolidation. And so the chart there just kind of shows you, again, this is last year's enrollment data. It kind of shows you a picture of what our challenge is. In our high schools, we have on average 1,600 students per grade level. In middle school, we have on average 1,400 students per grade level. At the elementary, we are averaging about 1,200 students per grade level. And so you can see that the lower enrollment is starting to make its way through, and it's going to be at the middle school level next. And so we don't have a decision made about what we want to do, but we want to bring the community in to the conversation. And so if you look at the timeline, it's a recommended timeline from me, but I'm going to work with the board to make sure that we have a good kind of agreement on what the process and timeline and engagement should be moving forward. So this is just to give people kind of a heads up. But in August is kind of the time of communication, doing some grounding in our equity-driven decision-making process. And then we want to put together a committee of stakeholders or people from the community who can kind of help us process information. From September to November, we're going to publish 2 demographer reports. So we wanted to make sure that we could triangulate a little bit better about what people are projecting for our schools, and then do some community engagement to look at the data, to share our hopes for middle school, to bring in other perspectives. In December, then, what we're planning to do is present a proposal based on that feedback. So we would present a proposal to the community. We would share back the feedback that we'd heard through the community engagement process, and then we would include an equity analysis at that time. In January, then we would go back to the community for more feedback on the proposal. And then February would be the timeline for us to bring a proposal to the school board, including kind of a summary of the feedback that we'd heard, another equity analysis updated, plus a recommended decision for the board. And then if we do make a decision to consolidate a middle school, let's just say, then we would do transition and implementation planning from March to June. So that's just an overview. We'll have more time to talk about that before we actually roll out an official timeline. But hopefully you see in this a lot more opportunities for community feedback. It would be general feedback as well as going out to some community organizations and doing some equitable kind of outreach, and then presenting a few equity analyses kind of along the way. Okay. All right, next slide. I'm excited about this to give you our summary of our annual plan from 22-23, but also the summary of our strategic plan from 2018 to 2023. So it's we've come up to the end of this 5-year strategic plan, and as you can see, kind of the big bucket areas in our plan were student well-being, academic success, creators of their future world, exceptional staff, family and community engagement. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Just to remind us, I think it's good to ground us in the mission and vision, but 5 years ago, we launched this inspiring mission and vision to serve each and every student academically, socially, emotionally, through a rigorous and relevant education that is innovative and individualized. As a learning community that values one another's humanity, we provide courageous support for an equitable and exceptional education for all students. And then our vision, of course, is to affirm and inspire each and every student to learn and thrive as creators of their future world. And so that mission, that vision, that was kind of our North Star, if you will, over the past 5 years. Next slide. We should acknowledge that in this past 5 years, our contact was very unique. We had 3 years of remote learning, coming back in person, but hybrid, and then being back in person, but with social distancing and rapid testing, pool testing, isolation and things like that. So in the past 5 years, 3 of those years were very impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. And so that's the context in which I'm going to be talking about the things that we accomplished and the things that we need to work on moving forward. Next slide. So what I wanted to share just in my short amount of time before I open it up for discussion is I just want to share the key headlines with you from this past year, but as the past 5 years as well. Student well-being was the highlight and ultimate, I think, signature of the strategic plan. And rightly so. It was very forward thinking of the board and the community to choose student well-being as a focus area. But with the pandemic, it was essential for our students' health and well-being. Our focus on belonging, connectedness, social emotional learning, mental health showed significant positive impact on students across demographics, particularly in the wake of the pandemic. So with those strengths and successes, what we're on the verge of, this is kind of growth mindset language, but what we're on the verge of, or what we see as our next steps is looking at street data or listening to our kids and talking to our students and families. We need to continue to increase focus on mental health and continue to build the beloved community, an environment free from racism and prejudice for our kids. So our students, even though we're seeing growth in mental health and student well-being, they're still telling us that we have work to do in creating affirming environments in our schools. Around academic success, the good news is academic achievement is rebounding post-pandemic at a faster pace than national trend or even comparable local districts. Our graduation rates have remained steady from pre-pandemic, but we've also established critical capacity in order to make gap closing gains in the next 5 years. So we've adopted a new math curriculum. We are going strong on early literacy, the science of reading. We've adopted a new math curriculum for middle and high school. So we've got a lot of the bones necessary in order for us to make gap closing goal gains over the next 5 years. What we're on the verge of is everything in the system for this to work has to work together effectively to address meeting the needs of students. So the curriculum has to be right. The PD has to be strong. We've got to have good instructional coaching. We've got to have strong multi-tier systems of support. So that's the mission critical work that we need to do. Creators of the Future World, we launched Global Competency as kind of the key part of Creators of the Future World. Our curriculum department has worked tirelessly, particularly over this past year, to build out curriculum and units that are problem and project based that help bring global competency into our curriculum. What we're on the verge of in that area is to continue to cast that vision of global competency, global citizenship, and building all of that into our pedagogy. So that's the work that we have to do in the future. Around exceptional staff, the highlights are that we've had great success in recruiting staff of color, particularly among our administrator ranks. What we're on the verge of is improving retention efforts. So we're doing a great job at bringing people in. We're not doing a good enough job at retaining people, making sure that there's an environment that is supportive for our educators of color. And then finally, in the area of family and community engagement, we're seeing a rebound in families feeling informed, supported, and empowered from the previous year, but we have a lot of work to do with our families. Some families are still feeling broken trust from during the time of the pandemic, and so you're going to see that what our next steps are is improving equity and excellence in communications moving forward, and then our work around equity-driven decision-making is our kind of systemic way of addressing empowerment for our families. Next slide. So you can't read this slide, and that's kind of on purpose. I know. It's kind of on purpose because what I want to show is we had this great conversation on Monday about metrics. What were the strength of metrics? What are the limitations of metrics? But what I want you to show you is this. Even though the report that you got was pages and pages long with all of this data disaggregated, some up, some down, beyond the metrics, there is so much that has happened that demonstrates the Bellevue School District's staff's resilience, their ability to rebuild post-pandemic, and the accomplishments despite all of the challenges that they faced last year. And so I just want to call out some of these things so you can hear what our staff has done just in this past year. We launched a Summit program at our 4 comprehensive high schools. Summit is a program for kids that have pretty significant anxiety, school refusal. For many families, once this child doesn't want to come to school, it's really difficult to get them to come back. But in all of our comprehensive high schools, we've created this classroom with a teacher who's trauma-informed and understands anxiety, where kids can just be there so that they're not at home. And then as they're getting therapy and mental health support, they get reacclimated into the classrooms that they can go into at first. We included digital programming so that they don't fall behind in their academics. And I'll tell you, it does not show up in the data, but the stories from our families about the support that this has provided for them to keep their kids in school is so tremendous. And so to our Summit staff who are out there, I'm just so thankful for you. Together, staff and the board, we navigated the loss of 2,000 students over the course of the pandemic. We worked together and reduced our budget by $24 million, which we're going to vote on today. That is a huge accomplishment for us, despite all of the challenges that came with it. Despite the cutting of $24 million, we maintained and expanded our mental health supports for our middle and high school students. And we added additional mental health supports for our elementary students because right after the pandemic, we saw a spike in kids with suicide ideation and behavior issues. And we were trying to decide if we needed more behavior support, but what we ended up doing was increasing our mental health support at elementary, and it made a huge impact. And so we're going to be adding that 1.0 to support our 3 schools that were impacted by consolidation so that they have ample support for mental health for kids. We trained hundreds of teachers on letters, science of reading. We are in our 2nd year implementing our new standards-aligned math curriculum at elementary. And what I'll say is our elementary teachers did this even though we were still dealing with pandemic. We had shortage of substitutes. I mean, it was a very challenging time, and they still brought on a new math curriculum. And what's amazing is, even though we still have a long ways to go in math, our growth data for the past 2 years are remarkable, specifically for subgroups like multilingual learners, students with disabilities. And that's because we adopted a curriculum centering our kids in the margins. We expanded CTE. We're adding aviation at Sammamish High School. We're adding a culinary program to Sammamish High School. Our board, you passed innovative policies last year around student well-being, around sustainability. We ignited global competencies. We brought Boom back for our students of color. We did it in person. We did it gender inclusive at Bellevue College. Our Black students rallied and started their first Black Student Summit. We saw an elevation of student voice. Our operations folks are amazing. We were understaffed in nutrition services, in transportation, in mechanics, in custodial, and yet we hardly skipped a beat in serving our students on the operational side. 85% of our kids received a 4 or 5 on their AP test this year. I mean, that's, I think, some of the highest that we've ever seen. 89% of our kids who took the Calculus BC exam passed that exam, compared to 78% pre-pandemic. I mean, these are some signs of rebound. 95% of our kids who took the English literature and composition exam passed, compared to 79% pre-pandemic. I mean, we have a lot of stuff and work to do, but those are some really good signs. We had our kids take the PISA exam. We're not trying to overtest our kids, but we want to see how our kids are doing compared, to national, international norms. But on the PISA for English language arts, we tested higher than any other country who took the test in 2018, than any other country. So we look at like China and all of these. So we could show you the data, but our kids tested higher. And the PISA does a random selection of students. So we don't just choose the kids who take the PISA. These are randomly selected students, and we're in the top 5 compared to other countries for mathematics on the PISA. We're developing an equity-driven decision-making process. You didn't even hear about this, but every 4 or 5 years, we have to do a comprehensive program review where the state comes in and audits all of our grant-funded programs. And we passed that with almost no findings. And so, I mean, our staff did a remarkable job. MLL, special education. We co-designed with the community an Arabic language program. We opened the brand new Puesta del Sol building. We started 2 employee resource groups. So Microsoft and other companies have employee resource groups, but we started 2, one for our LGBTQIA plus staff and one for our SWANA staff, Southwest Asia, North Africa staff who are connected to the Arabic language. We created this amazing wraparound services and supports for our students with limited or interrupted formal education, kids who are undocumented, unaccompanied minors. And then on top of all of that, and this is just a third of what's on this slide, we celebrated just unbelievable student successes in athletics, activities, robotics, rocketry, theater, music. But we also celebrated kids this summer who didn't pass their classes during the school year, but came back and gained their credits over the summer. We celebrated our students who had major issues with anxiety, but came back and got caught up through the summit program. And then we saw over 500 kids who are struggling with homelessness or are being unhoused, just keep coming back and working and being supported by the most incredible staff in our schools. And so I just want to say that when it was really good to kind of think about these things, but as I look back on the work that has happened in the Bellevue School District, I cannot imagine another school system that has done this amount of work coming out of a global pandemic. Next slide. Key reflections just to share. I think some of the things that I've been thinking about and our team has been thinking about, focus and direction does matter. And I think the work that the board and the superintendent does together, it is really important. Our focus on student well-being, that drove a lot of improvements for our kids. With regards to measures, I think measures can be helpful in driving change, but are insufficient in themselves. So I think when we looked at sense of belonging, or during COVID, we looked at like student connectedness, those things drove really positive change. But things like, measuring coping skills, I think that was really helpful to see that our students' coping skills are improving. But the amount of work around mental health is way bigger and beyond coping skills. So the measures are helpful, but also are not sufficient in themselves. Student voice was something huge from this past year and is why we are doubling down on student voice moving forward. We are looking for other ways of measuring street data, which you all have a book in front of you that we're going to go through together at some point this year. But we want to look at other ways of measuring success for students and progress. And then my last reflection is, it says board plus one, which is us, you and me. I think it's important that we revisit our reporting structures so that, for things like this, to talk about annual plan, our progress reporting mid-year, or when we do the summative next year, I'd love to see us maybe build that into study session time so that we can increase time for discussion and dialogue. Okay, next slide. And then this is just for fun, but we just want to, as I was talking to Eva, it's like the work of the annual plan, the work of this Bellevue School District was everybody together. I mean, today I got to have lunch with our custodial staff, and they're just celebrating the fact that, what they've accomplished through the pandemic, and then now coming out, getting schools ready, moving boxes, getting things beautiful so that on day one, the kids are thriving. This takes everybody in the system. And so if you go to the next slide, we'll just see if this works. But if not, it doesn't. Anyways, when we do it on our computer, it scrolls up like credits. Just imagine this being super impressive. That's every staff member's name kind of there we go, rolling up as credits. It freezes about halfway through, but these are our instructional staff, our operations staff. Eva's name is on there. Everybody's on there. Everybody's on there because it's a celebration of the great work. Okay, go ahead and move to the next slide before it freezes. It will freeze eventually. And then my closing comment about this is we are going to celebrate our staff. August 28th is the 60th anniversary of Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. And so I just can't think of a better way to celebrate him and his legacy, as well as how we're continuing that legacy by building a beloved community other than bringing all of our staff together. So August 28th, 2 to 4, we're going to celebrate all of our staff at Crossroads Park. We've got some awesome prizes from Bellevue Collection, Ascend. It's being sponsored by the Bellevue Schools Foundation. So I'm so thankful for the Bellevue Schools Foundation and their partnership. So we're just going to celebrate our staff because they're pretty darn amazing. All right, my last slide is just about discussion. So for this part, I think what would be helpful is just to let everybody kind of share a comment and a question. And then once everybody kind of shares that, then we'll do a discussion. And so Eva's here. Make sure you have a mic, Eva, and then our instructional staff, or there's some stuff on HR. So we'll just kind of pass the microphone around. But once we kind of hear what everyone's thoughts are and questions, then I'll try to guide the discussion from there for the next 5 or 10 minutes or so. 10 minutes, if we can go 10 minutes.
Okay, so total time 10 minutes, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't we elicit from everybody the question or comment, and then we'll shift to that. For those who know that our public comment usually starts at 5 p.m., we are going to be slightly behind, but not too behind. We will start our public comment at approximately 5:10 p.m. and we'll otherwise follow every aspect of our public comment protocol. So why don't we start in the middle this time? Director Chu, would you like to start with a comment or question? I meant middle of the alphabet. I often go at the beginning or very end of the alphabet. I thought I would start with you. Would you like to go?
No, I don't want to start. Thank you. I think we have this protocol where we're supposed to think about what order we take things in. So I think I'll just wait till later.
Okay, I'll go ahead. So I guess my question is, I think the data on sense of belonging is really powerful, and because it leads to so many other things, I was curious to know, is there a sort of a single factor that you thought was most impactful when it came to moving the dial on sense of belonging? So I'll leave that to my question. Any other board director? Director Aris?
Only one question?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're trying to follow the protocol we mentioned the other day.
Okay. In that case, let me. So you shared the data regarding the performance of our students pre-pandemic and after for calculus AP test, and it sounds like the result this last year was significantly better than before. I would like to know what caused the difference, and can we learn from that so that we continue on that growth pathway? Because if we are coming out of pandemic where students struggled, but yet they perform better, I mean, you get to know what helped them elevate into that space. And as also, well, okay, one question, so I'll hold off.
If we have time, we'll come back around.
Okay.
I guess mine is more of a comment. I look at the annual plan and we are focused, rightly so, like I totally support it, on trying to bring up the scores of, everybody and marginalized kids and special needs kids and kids who are struggling. And we need to be focused on that. But I think sometimes if we forget to kind of enumerate our successes, as Dr. Aramaki just had, and we lose track of that piece. And so out of this, I think we will continue to look at that achievement gap. So that's why I want to make sure everyone understands that. I think from my perspective, we will continue to focus on that. But you see all these sort of not met, not met, not met, not met going down the line on the annual plan. And that's because we are focusing on reaching all the kids. But I want us to celebrate these things that Dr. Aramaki just mentioned. I'm a person who follows the PISA exam closely. I mean, I think most parents don't, but I'm like so excited about that Bellevue is up there with, some of the really, top countries. You can rate yourself as a city and you can rate yourself as a country or whatnot, but that, we haven't lost our mojo. And I feel like there's a bit of a, I want to say, rumor out there in the community that, maybe Bellevue's lost its edge from those days. Well, I don't believe it. I think that, with this kind of success in AP English and AP Math and some of our other things, I think and apparently record number of national merit finalist type kids, I think we're doing well in the excellence area, but it's just, you don't realize it because we're focusing on trying to reach everybody. And that's my comment. And so my question would be, can we tout our, our own successes more to the world?
Okay, Director Chu.
Yeah, thanks. And I just wanted to note that I have been on this meeting since it started, that I just didn't, for some reason, the microphone and camera weren't able to be enabled for me. So I have hopefully heard everything that's happening because I could hear and see what was going on. So thank you. On the PISA, just a side note on that, like thinking about statistical analysis and so forth. Yeah, it is nice to see that we perform well, but I'm not sure comparing us to the average of a country as opposed to other districts in other countries and things is the same, equal footing. Yes, it is definitely good news, but if we wanted to get deep into the meaning of that, I think I'd want to see some district type data from across the globe as opposed to the unit being a comparison to country averages. So, but it is a good indicator that we're in a good place, and we should, as Caroline noted, we should be proud and excited for the wonderful successes of our students, motivated by our staff. My observation from this work is how important it is to set goals that are clear and that are actionable and that are meaningful to everyone. The sense of belonging had meaning across our district. People embraced it in different ways. It was understood universally, even though there was lots of nuance to it and people had different takes on it here and there, and different schools attacked it in different ways. It was something that we could all talk about collectively. If you look at the academic goals that we had, there were so many of them. They were very detailed, they were very focused, and in many cases, they were far from the classroom. So there was some talk that Kelly said about meaningful data measures and street data and things. I just want to emphasize that one of the things I think that in helping us make advances in multiple areas, goal setting can be very powerful, but it has to include, like with sense of belonging, everyone has to be empowered to give input on it, to be part of it, students, staff, families. We all bring some kind of expertise to the table. And we also know that the most meaningful academic data is that's closest to the classroom. And I think we made the mistake of sometimes focusing too much on standardized exams that, while statistically significant, didn't provide us the most actionable, meaningful, useful data. And I think it's really important that, sure, we should participate in standardized exams as checkpoints, but our focus should be on learning every day in our classrooms and how each person is welcome to participate, how each person can access that learning. So I'm hoping to see in the next round of strategic planning a way for us to set some of those goals that move us forward, all of us forward, not just some of us who are, some students who are highly accomplished or some teachers who are already trained or whatever it is, but move all of us forward. And I think, as has been pointed out by everyone at this point, we've got a lot to build on. We have a lot of wonderful things and wonderful energies and creativity that people are doing. Let's pick a couple of additional goals beyond the sense of belonging, and let's go after them together. I think this is an awesome and amazing start, and lots of places to build. And I like to really appreciate Kelly's forthcoming report, acknowledgement of strengths and weaknesses, celebration of the wonders that we have. Just really grateful and appreciative of having him in this role. So thank you for bringing this to us in a way that all of the community can access and not feel this is a growth mindset. Thank you. Thank you for this.
Thank you. Anybody on the team want to just chime in on some of the questions that they heard? Okay.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for that. And just some of the questions about was there a single factor or what caused the differences that we're seeing? I think what we realize is just how complex it is. So even with sense of belonging is the one example that we're hearing about, there wasn't one single strategy that led to the kinds of gains that we saw. And we realized that in instruction and in learning that it's just so complex. And so we can't say that there was one thing. You saw the list that Dr. Aramaki presented of all the things that have happened. All of those things contribute to the overall outcomes that we see. And so, it wasn't really, there wasn't like one thing that stood out to us. I will say though that the focus on student voice and agency is proving to be sort of the magic sauce. In other words, going directly and asking, same thing that we're doing with our families and with our staff, and asking them to help co-design solutions or the strategies is what really ultimately is making the biggest difference.
When we were in the pandemic, we narrowed our focus, if you remember, to connectedness, like students feeling connected to other kids. And I think it was a powerful thing. We got very narrow, but what it did was it got every school to think about, like, how are we engaging kids with each other online, activities, doing like teams, bingo events. And so when we did that, everybody got behind that, and it was such a powerful thing. So that was a clear strategy. I think the thing about sense of belonging that was powerful to me was all of the schools took a different angle to it based on who the kids were and what the needs were, because among the questions on sense of belonging, there's different markers, and so they would follow different things. But like some of the schools really, like they launched SOAR teams and Black student unions. And if you look at like our African American student sense of belonging, it increased at elementary, middle, and high, which is really great. We still have so much work to do, but they were like 10% difference from the rest of the kids, but we really brought them up to par with everybody else. But we did a lot of kind of cultural, racial focused, like affinity work. And I think that was really powerful, you know, and so I would say some of those things. And then a lot of schools took on like PBIS and things like that to try to elevate, but it was very school specific. But I like that we had a district-wide focus with schools having choice and in how they tackle it, you know. So when we look at the SIPs this coming year, it'll be really great to be able to see like kind of these are our big goals, but how are each school going to tackle these things in an individual way?
Director Ars, was your question answered within? I don't know if across those two answers you felt they were, that it wasn't.
Oh yeah, about AP.
Yeah, it was not necessarily need to be addressed at this point. It was more of I would love to see staff dig a little bit deeper into the data and see what are the what went right to increase that percentage, because it shouldn't. You know, when you think about all the negative things and all the challenges that our students went through the COVID, but yet they came ahead comparatively to pre-pandemic. So I would love to capture that and make sure that we're putting that back into the mixture of our tools as we move forward. I do have one other question, which is that you mentioned 1 point additional mental health staff for the 3 schools that are consolidated. What was it before, or what was it before we added the 1?
Yeah, we had, do you want to talk, can you talk about that, Heather, real quick? Just about, so what's really great about MHAT, I'm just going to say this before Heather grabs the mic, is we launched MHAT middle and high school because a lot of the internalizing issues, the behaviors or anxiety was, at the upper grades. But then I think we saw like significant challenges at the elementary. So we added like 1 or 2 first to try it. And so go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So we did add we had 2 counselors at the elementary level that were dedicated to elementary mental health support. That was in addition, though, to additional counseling we already had in our Title I schools. So each of our Title I schools already had an additional 1.0 counselor, which would have essentially been then 6.0 on top of the 18 we had. And now we've added another 1.0 to the central. So we have 3 central, and then we'll have the 16 that we have in our school-based, plus the 4 that we'll have now at Stevenson, Ardmore, Sherwood Forest, and Lake Hills.
I'm gonna hand it back to you, President Serafan. The last comment I'll just make about this is where value-driven decision-making matters, because we as a system said we value student well-being, mental health. And so the issue that was presented to us at elementary was around behaviors. I mean, some of it was suicide ideation, but a lot of it was kids like throwing chairs and just really extreme behaviors coming out of the pandemic. But because we value student well-being, mental health, that was the solution we went after, as opposed to looking at discipline or exclusion and things like that. And I mean, I shouldn't be surprised, but it's remarkable the impact of having someone who's got expertise in mental health and trauma, teaching staffs, working, coaching teachers, coming side by side with families and kids. So it's a good example of when we value something and we project that like around student well-being, that it does impact the decisions we make about kids on a day-to-day basis.
I'm going to suggest, because this is an interesting topic, and I think you were looking for more input, and maybe board directors are interested in this. We could, if you're amenable, we can go to public comment and come back and maybe spend a little more time. We don't have 30 minutes for it, but we can at least make sure that we're not sort of prematurely cutting off what I think was, as Director Chu said, a very robust and thoughtful presentation. And there may be more that people want to say. So at this time, I suggest we go to item 4. I kind of got affirmative consent from board directors through their nodding. So I think we have I think the plan to go to 4.0 and come back to 3.1 for any finishing comments on item 3. So at this time we go to public comment, and any people online or in the room who may be participating in public comment tonight, please make sure you read what's projected, as well as what I will summarize here. This is the time during our meetings when we receive public comment. The details about public comment and our expectations are projected right now, and they're on our agenda. They're displayed on the screen. We ask you to make sure that you read them. And we also want to remind you that you can communicate with us by email as well as voicemail. This is not the only way to communicate with the board. We are, as a board, grateful for your public comment, and we appreciate the thoughtful input of our community. Because of the limitations of our board calendar as well as our policy, board public comment is limited to 20 minutes total, and individual remarks are limited by person to 2 minutes. We as a board will listen to all your comments carefully, but we generally do not respond. We expect speakers to engage in a civil manner and not to engage in any form of communication that's identified as unacceptable in our policy, in our agenda, including slander and libel, invasion of privacy, obscenities and harassment, intimidation, bullying, or discrimination. We also cannot accept public comment on pending investigations involving student discipline, or allegations of employee misconduct, or allegations of discrimination or harassment, and that is in order to preserve our ability as a board to hear appeals. So again, back to our first point, we thank you, and we ask you to remember that although we will be listening to all comments intently, we generally do not respond to comments in this setting unless they violate our policy. Thank you. Executive Director Harrison, who do we have for public comment tonight?
We have 3 public commenters this evening, and if there we go. I'd like to start with the online commenter. We have Ursi de Richmond ready to speak. We could elevate her.
Okay, are we enabling Ms. de Richmond to speak?
I hope so.
Okay.
Is she there? There she is.
Okay, if you'd like to go on camera, feel free. Maybe we can start by just making sure we can hear you. Ms. de Richmond? Can I ask our tech support crew if we've successfully, okay, we have enabled you to speak. I think if we don't hear from you, what we might do is go to people in the room and come back to you.
Just needs to unmute.
Okay, can you unmute? All right, why don't we
Come back.
why don't we move to the next person on your list?
Mr. Joel Ingram.
Thank you. Thank you, board, and thank you, Dr. Aramaki. As you spoke, Dr. Aramaki, tonight, it really resonated to me about talking about getting all the pieces right and pulling everything together to make sure that you have a well-oiled machine. And I'd really like to celebrate some of the work that Bellevue has been doing, especially in the area of early literacy over the past 2 years. As you highlighted in your report regarding letters, over 160 teachers have now either completed or in the process of completing the first 4 units of the professional development. And that is a full year commitment. That's no small undertaking. I'd also like to highlight, which was presented in the online material, that you're launching cohort 2 this fall. That's the teachers who didn't have enough time to begin with, somehow squeezed in 80 to 160 hours of extra professional development, and they signed up for another year. That speaks very highly to what the district is doing and to the quality of this professional development. So thank you. I'd also like to highlight the fact that Haggerty Phonemic Awareness is now a basic curriculum resource and should be, all students should be expected to be receiving this in the K2 setting. Thank you. Also, UFly, which is a phonics program, also for the K2 target audience, will be available this year. So thank you for that. Hopefully this will also become within a year a basic curriculum resource just like Haggerty. I'm also, thank you for the P5 literacy adoption that is underway. I'd also like to highlight the literacy manipulatives that teaching and learning is providing, along with, there was 2 PTAs that contributed $6,500 towards that project. And that was a great opportunity to partner with the district regarding that. As we look towards the annual plan and the data that's included, specifically the STAR reading, I'd like to challenge and also consider looking at early literacy data as opposed to reading data. And really, if we want to celebrate that growth, are we looking at young enough data or early enough data that specifically measures? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ingraham.
Okay,
And
do we have Ms. DeRichmond ready, or we have online Ertzi DeRichmond. Are you ready to speak? Okay, I might ask Mr. Albrecht if you can contact Mr. Richmond offline, and we'll see if we can enable that comment. If not, we'll go to our next person. Or as that's happening, we'll go to our next person. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Alex Zimmerman.
Hi, my name is Alex Zimmerman, and I live in Bellevue more than 35 years. My experience with public speech come from '96. I speak more than 3,000 times from Tacoma to Everett, and 100 times in school board, similar to you. And I very appreciate you, so you give me a chance to speak again after 6 months wrong trespass, what is you give me. So guys, I'm totally confused about one point, what is make me feel not so good, you know what this mean? You know what this mean, freedom of speech? You know this? Are you all Americans? You have citizenship, you know we have a constitution, US Constitution, state constitution, Open Public Meeting Act, and freedom of speech for 250 years. I'm totally confused, you know, about this. It's my experience. And I give you a couple examples. Example number 1, nobody in King County, absolutely, include another city too, have 20 minutes and 10 people. I never see this, and I spoke more than 3,000 times all over. Yep, so this very bad idea. This very bad idea because you show us children, so we have a limitation of opinion. How school from babies 5-year-old to 16-year-old, you know what this mean? You clean their brain and put in their brain so you have a right operation like a corporation, like inside. People who speak here never mention their name, you know what this means? This can happen only in very close corporation. So guys, I'd be very happy when you change these rules, because when you don't have a principle, fundamental, how you can teach children, you know what this means, and be best of the planet, you know what this means. I'm totally confused about this. See you next time. Bye.
Thank you. Mr. Harrison, do we have Mr. Richmond available? Or has anybody been able to reach Mr. Richmond? Okay.
Yeah.
I think in light of that, we conclude our public comment. We invite Mr. Richmond or anyone who had intended to speak tonight to come back to us at another time. I understand we have no other speakers. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Can we make sure that we explicitly email Ms. Richmond, because
Yeah,
they were
trying to reach them.
online, like they were specifically
that.
on had their hand raised. Okay.
Yeah, we're actually trying offline to reach them, but I think so far we've not been successful. But I do appreciate what you're saying. Thank you. So we'll go back to Superintendent Armaki. We'll go back to where we were on essentially the discussion slide. We'll say item 3.1, and we'll go ahead and take 10 minutes if we could. Jess, if you can project that. And why don't we go ahead and, I think we were starting to address, I think, the question that Director Ars had. And I think you were giving sort of a preliminary answer, but maybe there was more there and we had to shift. So let's go back to that. And Mr. Albrecht, Jess, George, whoever, just project if you don't mind to keep us honest, 10 minutes. Thank you. All right.
I think the only thing I'll add is just thinking about AP. I think that's a good question. Because I think that's a good thing for us to kind of look into is like, why is it that, our kids, have shown so much success this past year on the AP test in ELA, in the literature classes, and in the math classes, but all around 85% on, 4s and 5s on, all of our AP tests. It is something for us to ask our teachers. I think the thing that I would hypothesize is our teachers work so hard. I mean, because they know, we've heard this for the past couple of years, that the kids are coming in having missed a lot. And so the teachers are, they're just bending over backwards to try to catch the kids up, really like make sure that the kids have the content that they need, in order to be successful. And so I think just initially what I would say is I would attribute to our teachers work so hard, to kind of meet kids where they are and then just make sure that they have the content needed in order to do well on the AP exams. And then just hearing, stories from kids at the high school, after the tests are over, the teachers then, they don't waste the rest of the year. A lot of them then do these great projects and things, to get kids excited. And so I really appreciate the teachers' hard work on that. I don't know if anybody wants to add to that, but it's, I'm thankful for the teachers because from kindergarten all the way up to 12th grade, they're seeing kids with not the same skill level as they have in the past. And when you look at the data in the annual plan report, and thanks to Eva for all your hard work in kind of compiling and bringing everyone together to do that, we have a lot of kids that are not necessarily ready for the next level of math or whatever. And so we have a lot of work to do. So.
I do want to make sure to say that, it's something we do need to celebrate, and whatever the formula it was, it should be captured, because as a school district as a whole, we know as we have our students start at kindergarten level, we also have a lot of students that come and go. And so we don't have the same students from beginning to the end. So when we are at the end and these students are taking AP tests, they're not necessarily all of our students who have had the robust experience. To have that leap is significant. And I would love to make sure that we capture that and also acknowledge not just the teachers and the staff, but also the students, whatever that synergy was that made it happen. If we could, hold on to that and use that and use it as we move forward.
I'll just expand that too and say, even outside of the AP realm and the testing and everything, our CTE teachers too, they have just gone crazy in a really good way in giving kids opportunities. And so like Jack is here to talk about the demolishing of the old Sunset building, but the work that Jack is doing with our Woods department at Interlake High School, they're working, like it's just innovation like you've just never seen, like working with the city so that the kids can work with contractors and build an actual like structure on the campus so that they can build their tiny houses outside and then be able to deliver them to support the homeless. It's in every aspect of our school district. People are doing this innovative work. Kids are working so hard, learning, getting their industry certifications. And so, and this is all on the heels of, we haven't even talked about our challenges with like, substitutes and, and uncovered classrooms and things like, people still getting COVID and being out sick and things like that. Like on top of all of that, the teachers and staffs and principals are out there doing this amazing work. And so, and then that just the mental health, I am really struck by are laser focused on student well-being, how that was pre-pandemic. Nobody predicted the pandemic. And then through the pandemic, it was that work that I think carried us through and helped us to recover afterwards. So
I wanted to go to, there were comments I think were made by Director Watson as well as Director Chu, and I think they were intended to be comments, but I don't know if there was anything. I heard kind of you started with a comment, but then you kind of threw a question at the very end, but I don't know if there was anything more that people wanted to talk about there. We've got about 5 minutes, so we don't have an hour.
I just wanted to encourage us to, pull out those fun facts, those really good things, and let the community know more. And I do want to say that I will continue to celebrate our scores on the PISA because according to articles by Brookings and research and things like that I have found online, China does test the whole country. 40% of the kids have already dropped out before they get to the grade where they would be tested. Only 4 provinces test. The schools, it's supposed to be a random sample, but they really are only testing in high schools where 85% of the kids are already college bound. So for us to do well against them and Singapore and Macau is just still really great to my mind.
I'm grateful for that context around the PISA. I wasn't aware of that. That's really helpful. Sorry, Deputy Superintendent.
Oh, just to respond to Director Watson's request that we tout some of these things that we really want to celebrate that our kids are accomplishing. We have an opportunity to do that through the new strategic plan effort. And that'll be an opportunity when we're going out into the community for us to really shine, and share some of the things that we're so proud of for our students. And then I will also say about the PISA data, the data that we had from the countries was pre-pandemic. Our pre-pandemic scores were quite impressive. And so even though we went down slightly, our comparison is our post-pandemic with the countries pre-pandemic because they only administer every 3 years and they hadn't yet reported the most recent scores.
thank you.
Okay. Okay, Director Aris. She sees 3 minutes. She's like, I got more. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm using my minutes here. I actually have a couple of asks. One is I love that long list in tiny font because the list is so long that it's tiny font. And I think I know we have report cards of our grades, of our academics and whatnot, but to me, this is also another report card of our overall performance as a district. And it would be great to celebrate it, in a very loud and bold ways so that not just our parents of our students, but the larger community sees it. I think there's so much in that could be accentuated and be shared. That said, putting that aside, I know that you mentioned about the Creators of the Future World, which we launched, and students are doing the global competency in project-based learning. Is that from elementary all the way up?
All the way.
Okay, and I'd love to see like a presentation of what does that look like now versus when we initially had that discussion around that, because I think, again, it's another space we should be celebrating as well as also see how we can do, how we're moving along on that space. And as far as I think the initial slide you shared about engaging our community as we look into this future on the possible consolidation and whatnot, I do hope that I know our community has given a lot of feedback in the way we engaged in the past year, that we take that into note and make sure that we are doing taking those into consideration as we engage our community again in this space, so that we don't fall into the same trap or things that make our community feel discouraged.
I want to make sure Director Chu's hand is up. So I do want to, we got a minute and a half, and I want to make sure we both honor your promise of trying to stay on time and also hear from Director Chu. So Director Chu, go ahead.
Thanks. And I think we'll have some time in the annual plan conversation too, in case some of this needs to continue. So this is a great opportunity. Thank you. The quick questions, feedback pieces that I'd leave on here are, you gave us a schedule for the middle school and consolidation and so forth. It would be great to make sure, that if that schedule, if you present a plan and for some reason additional community feedback finds an issue with that plan that's substantial, did you give yourself enough time to recover? Because I think this year, by presenting in that January, February timeframe, the recommendations, there wasn't enough time to recover, and that seems to be set up for again this year. And even though you're getting upfront, a lot of times people don't know how to give the feedback or don't feel as motivated to participate in the feedback process until there's something concrete to comment on. So might want to think about when the concrete recommendation comes out on the timeline. Second, I think it would be super helpful to understand what is the long-range planning plan. Like, what is our timeline and our process for doing a strategic plan refresh? Because we're doing the middle school and that sort of fits into this, but it's not the be-all end-all of all of it. It's a piece of it. And then the shoot, at that buzzer just killed me. So I'll think and I'll send another item, I think, because it's just I think as we go through, we should be really, I know, on the consolidation piece also, we'll talk directly to the folks who are impacted directly by the consolidation, but let's make sure that we acknowledge any fallout decisions that will be constrained by it. So like, if that building that we close, that we pull kids out of and consolidate them into other things is going to be used for another school building instead of remodeling, or if anything like that is happening, that should be transparent up front, and the community impacted by that should also be able to participate, and their needs should be on the table for the decision making. So those are the three things I want to call out, and I want to thank you again for the clarity and the real leaning in and the presentation, both to our strengths and our growth. So thank you very, very much for that. And yeah.
Right, we move now. Thank you. That concludes our pulled out and continued item 3, our superintendent update. We move to item 5. I know Mr. McLeod is ready to present, so thank you for your patience and sorry for the delay. I believe you have a proposal for an approval of an award contract for the Old Sunset Elementary demolition. So
yeah, that's correct. Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, we'd like to go ahead and recommend that the board award a contract for the Old Sunset Elementary demolition project, and the award going to Core Infrastructure Services in the amount of $394,734.25. We opened bids about a week ago on August 10th. We had 5 responsive bidders, and the architect's estimate for the project was $600,000. So they are well under that estimate, and all of their submittals for references, things like that, were in order. And so we are recommending the award of that. And this will get us in the first step of getting to the robotics center that was presented to you here a couple of weeks ago.
okay, I'm going to, for the purpose of discussion, ask for a second to my motion to approve the requested approval of Core Infrastructure Services as the selected contractor. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we're now going to have discussion. I see a question from Director Aris. And I think also followed by one from Director Chu, and I have a comment too.
Once a building has been demolished, what would we do with the blank slate? Is it?
Okay, we will go ahead and do some site improvements to it. One of the things that we are doing is just taking the building down. We're going to leave the slab and those infrastructure items in place. We're keeping 4 buildings on the site that will be used for the robotics center. And so we're going to maintain the site. We'll go ahead and put some protective type surfacing on it, and just go ahead and be able to still use the fields and have those for community use. So we're going to try to maintain the site in a relatively undisturbed manner, with the exception of the 4 buildings.
Would the playground be also removed as well? Or
no, we're going to keep that playground. We are going to remove, there's a wooden component of the playground, and we're going to remove that because those are those are problematic for us to maintain, and they start to rot and have structural problems over the years.
All right, great, thank you.
Director Chu?
Thanks. Yeah, that answered most of my questions, but just following up, why do we, I'm not entirely clear why we're demolishing versus keeping and renting or doing something. Like, what is the urgency to demolish? And that's really it.
Because of the vandalism we've experienced in the classroom components of that school, we've had a lot of neighborhood kids and things like that breaking into it, getting up on the roof, building fires for a little kumbaya thing up there on the weekends and stuff. So it's a really an attractive nuisance that we'd like to go ahead and take care of that. And then we're going to go ahead and do the work on the robotics center to try to add some security and other things in there, and it will get more use. And so we'll have a lot more, traffic in there and a lot more occupancy in those buildings.
So just to follow up to that, so does that mean that we'll have cameras added and that we'll potentially try to remove roof access for the other buildings so that, okay.
We are going to take care of that. We're going to try to go ahead and replace a lot of the low level windows and keep some of the clerestory stuff up higher for natural lighting, but don't make it a place where we can have break-ins and that type of thing.
I have a question for, I think it's a clarifying question for Deputy Superintendent. Can you speak to what part of the budget this kind of cost comes from, just to disabuse anybody of the notion that this is at variance with things we've said in the past?
Yes, absolutely. So this will come from our capital budget, our capital projects fund, which can only be used for facilities maintenance, significant facilities maintenance, renovations, demolitions, and building new buildings. It cannot be used for, that fund cannot be used for salaries and benefits of educators or any other ongoing expenditures that support our daily operations.
Okay, I think we will come back to that when we speak more broadly about the budget, but I think it's worth pointing out. Okay, so our motion having been seconded and no further discussion, or am I wrong? Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify one thing. So I think what I'm deriving from what you're saying is that there'll be a real eye to safety. Like where you've demolished things, will it be like flat or fenced off, or it'll be safe for?
It will be safe for people that are going to use the fields and the playground and things like that. Yeah, one of the things that we did to expedite this is not have to go ahead and excavate a lot of the soils and things like that, so we didn't have to go through a clear and grade permit. So basically, we're going to keep everything down to the slab, and then we will go ahead and address those issues to make it safe, and so it won't be problematic for people coming through.
But will it be a fence around it, or it'll be flat with something covering it?
We're going to, right now, we hope to be able to keep it open.
Okay.
So they can have access to the fields and access to the site.
All right.
But we'll take away all the other things that have created problems for us.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay,
we're going to vote on the award of contract to Core Infrastructure Services in the amount of $394,000, $734.25. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. The motion carries. Thank you. Okay, I believe we now go to our annual plan, which is item 6.1, or the presentation of the annual plan. Is that Dr. Armaki? Will you be doing that?
Yeah, great. I will.
Okay,
sure.
thank you.
All right. If you want to just put up my slides, that'd be great. We already started this conversation, which is exciting. So I'm excited to talk about the annual plan for next year. Is there a slide before? Oh, there we go. Okay, so we had, just a reminder, we've had 3 study sessions on this. I mean, we did a lot of work together to try to build out what we want this coming year to look like. We're calling this the Bridge Annual Plan because it bridges the, from our previous strategic plan, which has now ended, to the one that we're hoping to start next fall. And so we are hoping to start kind of the engagement for the next strategic plan sometime around December, January. So we know we have 2 big community engagement things happening this coming year. One is looking at middle school enrollment, and one is strategic planning. And so we're hoping that we can kind of not have them overlap too much, But that's what we're going to be starting. But in the meantime, from our work together between the board and myself and the staff and our teachers that were involved, this is what we're proposing. So if you go to the next slide, you've seen this slide before, but these are kind of our priorities that I've been talking about a lot. And you'll see these things kind of embedded in this annual plan, really continuing to elevate student well-being, but we added staff well-being. Post-pandemic, caring for our staff is a critical thing for us to do. Beloved community, solutionaries, innovation, cultivating joy, educational excellence. I tried to take out the word cultivating, but I just couldn't at this time. So anyway, so we're not adopting this anyways, but those were the 6 that we've been kind of thinking about together. Next slide. So these are the 4 sections of the annual plan that I'm presenting. The first one is a laser focus from the whole system around student voice and agency. Sometimes I say, like in some circles, like student voice and agency from the classroom to the boardroom. But we want kids to talk to us about what they want in the classroom, all the way to giving public comment. We want them to be the ones who are driving the improvement in this school district. So student voice and agency from classroom to the boardroom. That's one part of the annual plan. The second one is educational excellence. And so this is our mission critical work that I'm going to talk about in a second. Third is a kind of a recommitment to equity. And so what I tell people is, people have been asking me, like, are we going to bring recenter equity work in our school district? And I said, yes, and we have the map to do it. We've got 0130, and it is so solid. And it's like, it was a community process putting that together. And so that's kind of our roadmap towards equity. And so we want to bring that into the annual plan in a very direct way. And then the last one is around operational excellence. And so when you look at last year's, the last strategic plan, operational alignment was part of that. And so I do want to bring some aspects of operational excellence to this annual plan that I think will impact students and families the most. Next slide. Okay, so elevating student voice and agency. Something, Christine, that you had mentioned at one of our work sessions was like, what is it in a nutshell, or what is it in a sentence? Like, how do we capture this in a sentence? But it is around, like, I think the hallmark of this annual plan is about elevating our kids' voices and their agency in order to cultivate joy and well-being while transforming learning experiences in the classroom and school-wide. When we asked the question, like, what is the one thing you would want us to accomplish this coming year? I think the board resoundingly said, like, we want our kids to have, like, increased engagement in the classroom. And so that is what we're planning to deliver. So we're asking all of our schools to think about how they're going to elevate student voice and agency. We're going to teach them a couple of different strategies on how they can do it in the classroom, but we're also going to talk to them about how they can elevate students' voices at the school level, like improving the welcoming environments, a sense of belonging, and things like that. So each school improvement plan will have a section on the ways that they're going to elevate student voice and agency. And then we're going to do it at the district level too. And then that's a conversation that we're also having at the board level. How are we continuing to elevate student voice? Next slide. The second part of it is educational excellence, which I call kind of our mission critical work. Like when it comes to public school systems, like we have to deliver on these things. And so I'm glad Joel's here, and because one of the things is, so the first one is P5 elementary schools. Like with declining enrollment comes the opportunity to push towards universal preschool, making sure that every child has an opportunity for preschool. And so you're going to see us really work hard to bring back preschool as a kind of a key part of the education system here in Bellevue. The second thing is early literacy, making sure that all kids are reading and writing, using kind of science of reading, multilingual kind of language approaches. And so we're going to double down on that. And I think in addition to looking at STAR, Smarter Balance, we are going to bring the board along by looking at things like how kids are doing with phonemic awareness, how they're doing on the Dibbles assessment. So one of the things we're going to do is as we're looking at the data at kind of the more granular level, we're going to bring the board along so we can kind of study this together. We're implementing curriculum like Heggerty, which is about phonemic awareness. And we want to see that direct impact on outcomes in the area of phonemic awareness. I mean, when it comes to the science of reading, it's that specific, you know, so that is a key deliverable. It is an injustice to have kids not reading by the time they graduate from elementary school. So that's one. The next one is taking a systemic approach to math achievement. So grades 3 through Algebra 2, we're adopting a new curriculum for middle school up through Algebra 2 and high school. We are in the second year, as I mentioned, in a new curriculum for elementary schools. And what's really exciting is when you have a curriculum that's aligned to the standards and the curriculum pedagogically is grounded in supporting language learning and universal design for learning, it's pretty amazing what happens. Like, and you take that and you add it to really great teachers and great professional development, we have good outcomes. And so we're seeing really good results for our elementary schools. Heather and I just talked about this morning, but the growth of our kids, specifically in subgroups like students with disabilities, students who are multilingual learners, they're showing way more growth in math than they did before the pandemic with the old curriculum. So we have the stage set for that, for math. And then at the high school level, instead of looking at graduation rates, because we're always about 97, 98%. I mean, we do a great job graduating our students. What we want to do is to help us inform what could possibly be for the next strategic plan, we want to look at other ways that show our kids are ready for the future. And so the things that we're going to start to measure and look at are how many of our students get the seal of biliteracy, demonstrate that they're bilingual biliterate. And we want to just continue to grow that. The dream would be that every student who wants to be bilingual biliterate in Bellevue has that opportunity. Participation in college level courses, it's so small I can barely see it on my screen. Participation in college level courses, so access to AP, IB, college in the high school, running start. We want to send our kids who go to college with college credits. You know, it's such an equity-driven support. We want to increase internship opportunities for our kids. We want to increase industry certification opportunities through CTE. Like an example I put there is like our nursing assistants. Like for kids who are at Sammamish High School, they can take this nursing assistants CTE skill center course and then graduate with a nursing assistant license. I mean, it really sets kids up for success outside of high school. And then global competencies. And so we want our students to be globally minded, caring about the planet and about people, and then going out there and making a difference. So that's the work around educational excellence. Next slide. I probably spent too much time on that one, but that one is critical. So this one around racial equity, what I'll say is this. We have a policy, 0130. It's very clear about what the deliverables are. And the only way for us to achieve that is if our schools are tackling it. So in the same way that we're all looking at sense of belonging, and schools might be tackling different things, but towards the same end, if we value racial equity and equitable outcomes for our kids, and we have the roadmap to do it, what we're going to ask schools to do is every school has a racial equity and inclusion team. We're going to ask them to look at these commitments that are in 0130 and to choose one or two of them that are specifically important to their building, and then to set goals around that, so that together we see an impact on racial equity in our system. And then the last slide, the last two slides are around operations. So there's two operational areas that I think are going to make a big impact for our kids and for our families. One is around communications. So we have an incredible chief of communications in Janine Thorne. And so we're just going to keep pushing for excellence and equity in communications. The excellence is just around improved website, improved newsletters, making sure that there's consistency, predictability. The equity comes in the form of making sure that it's accessible in any language that the family speaks at home. So a really big focus on language access for our families. Related to that, we're going to focus our tagline is inform, support, and empower for our families. But the empower part of working with families is making sure that we embed equity into the decision-making process, which we're going to learn more about this coming year. Next slide. And this one is my last slide on the annual plan. But our families are concerned about safety and security. You know, we can do all these great things, but if students don't feel safe in the building, and if families don't feel safe, their kids are safe in the building, it undermines everything. And so working with Doug and his team, we're making safety and security and emergency preparedness kind of our last operational excellence kind of focus area. And so what we're going to do is implement a multi-layered research-based approach to school safety, including kind of, this is the key focus, but 100% school participation in annual emergency preparedness training. So up till now, we've had amazing trainings, but schools opted into trainings. But from this year, every school, every single year is going to be a part of emergency preparedness training. We're building the system to do it. We're building the schedule to do it. There's a partnership between Heather Edlund and Doug and others who are kind of building out the infrastructure for that. But we want to make sure that all of our schools are well prepared, because one of the most important research-based strategies for safety, preventing school violence and things like that is being prepared and having all staff trained. The second aspect of that is our safety and security team does safety audits 3 times a year, and we're just going to elevate that a little bit. So bring our attention to how our schools are doing with safety audits, and the safety audits are all around our schools using the lobby guard effectively. Is there one point of entry? Are all external doors locked? Is every classroom door locked and with a magnet in it? So there's certain things that we're looking for that are all research-based around emergency preparedness. And then I think, is that it? Is the last slide just about discussion? Yeah, so, yeah, anyways, that's the end of the annual plan.
I want to make a suggestion. We have, on the one hand, our superintendent asked, could we end on time? On the other hand, I don't think we can. So I'm going to make a suggestion. If board directors are amenable, I suggest we borrow from our director discussion time, leaving 5 minutes at the end, but bringing up 15 minutes now so that we can use it towards an actual discussion around the annual plan. How do board directors feel about that? Okay, I see affirmative consent. So I think at that point we will, we'll still keep 5 minutes at the end for us each to have a little bit of reflection, but right, why don't we open it up now for thoughts, reactions, questions, and I think you can decide how you want to answer them, or whether you answer them now or later.
Okay, sure. I think it worked for me just to kind of hear everyone's thoughts first and then
Sure.
to engage in discussion. So that would be great. Thank you. And that was a very nice way of saying that I went long. I appreciated that. Okay.
I think, frankly, I think we needed to allocate more time for tonight.
No, it's good.
Really great content, but I also don't want to shortchange our opportunity to talk about our budget tonight, which I know is an important thing to make sure we address.
All right, great.
So any board director like to start? I think we will roughly give ourselves, I'll say 15 minutes here. And so as long as we kind of adhere to that, we can, how we divide that is up to us. Oh, Director Chu, go ahead.
Great, thank you. I think this is a great plan. I think you've got great aspirations. I'm excited about it. I think that there are a couple of questions that I have. So we'll kind of throw them at you and wonder if we might be able to in answering them, be able to sharpen a couple of things up. What I see in this plan is I see both an annual focusing goal and I see a set of operational commitments. And I think if we want our community to really grab onto something, what we've seen in the past is they can grab onto something really tangible. And usually that's 1 to 3 things. And so far it's been sense of belonging. And I think it's also to some extent been the piece on empowering our families. So, and those things I think have traction in our community. So I wonder on this one, that one statement you have on the student voice, would that for you be the single focusing goal that you really want us all to move towards together, and all these other things are going to kind of leverage and support that as well? And then the second question I'd ask is, can you be a little more directional without being prescriptive on the word transform? Because when we talk about transform educational experiences, or I don't have that in front of me, but the phrase that you had come up with was, we're going to listen to kids so that we can, they'll be engaged and involved, and they're going to be joyful and transform experiences or something. If that is the statement that's going to drive us, can we be a little directional about what it means to transform their instructional and learning experiences? So those are the two things I would just focus on, and I'm not going to go anywhere else, because I think the power in an annual plan, 1 year, is to have a very clear direction. So if we could go around that and then kind of be clear about what is our focusing goal and what are our operational commitments to get there.
Director Aris or Watson, would you like to go next? If not, I'm happy to jump in. What's your preference? I'll go. How about if I go? Okay, so I'll offer a few thoughts. I think two things kind of came to mind. One, just overall on student voice, and for me, it relates to engagement in class, and I think it also, for me, also evokes just, even though it's different, like just our focus on quality of instruction. I feel like they all tie together. So the one piece I'd love to see us emphasize is something you'd said a few months ago when we talked about the annual plan. As you said, I want to spend this year listening to all the students, and I think just if we can, it ties a bit to celebrating, but if we can really ensure that students understand that, that's actually a key goal of ours, and why it's relevant and how it's relevant, I hope they really lean into it. Because we've seen them lean in on specific issues or topics. We've seen how that can show up and how impactful it can be. But just them understanding truly that that was a goal you had, and how and why it's important. The other thing I was going to just say, related to engagement, it's different. It's just on our community engagement more broadly. It ties a bit to a point that Director Chu called out, and I thought it was worth mentioning. In terms of like the timing, for me, I think it's the same point, but maybe less about like when, but more about how. When we present about on the consolidation, a thing we could do better is just letting people know like the sequence of things that can be impacted. I think if we were to look back and say what we could do, what we could have done better, and we can pull it forward, it's just to let people know one thing will impact another, and the possibilities of what could be impacted. Just understanding that at the front end makes it feel like less of a surprise. Finally, I just wanted to say, because of that picture of the our booths, the entry and the driver's license, we talked about this.
Oh, yeah.
And I think I'm hoping, it feels like a public service announcement, that people realize that it's not fair to the secretaries or the people who are our front end people if each of us doesn't participate. So, and I'm as guilty as anybody else, and I'm like, this is on me too. Pull out your driver's license. If everybody complies, it means that that person doesn't have to say, I suspect you particularly have to follow the rules. Because if you say, I already know you, Seema, or I already know you, Jane or Carolyn, you don't have to do this, you're effectively making people be subjective about who should follow those rules or not. So I think if we all kind of follow a 100% adherence to that great work that Deputy Superintendent DeVita did and Doug James did in building all these great vestibules, if we all follow it, it really does actually then work. But I count myself in there. I'm like, oh, I forgot my driver's license, but you already know me. Okay, so that's, I guess, my thoughts. Director Aris or Watson, who wants to go next?
First of all, I really want to thank you for sharing the annual plan and showing evidence for each of the items, so that we know how that's going to play out. The student agency component, I do hope that we make that loud and clear, that each of our students know that that is a goal, and that they're very clear that this is our focus this year, so they know that we're ready and willing to make sure that we're engaging them appropriately. With that said, I noticed in the evidence component, there's a panorama. Panorama is the tool we're going to use to measure that. Will there be a question or questions that will reflect that?
I think there is a question in the panorama that's about student voice and agency. Do you know, Eva, anybody? I'm not sure. We didn't want to let panorama go because we felt it was a critical thing, but it's not necessarily going to be the driver for student voice and agency, because what we're going to ask people to do is listen to kids and start like collating their learning, you know, kind of more anecdotally and in themes, as opposed to using like a tool. So we don't want to let go of the tool, which is why we put panorama in there, because some schools still want to really keep working on a sense of belonging and things like that in that direction. But
so a couple things about that. First, in Panorama, I don't remember specifically the questions, but there is a student engagement domain. And when we were talking to our principals about the measures and about the school improvement plan and the annual plan, they talked about wanting to go back and look at all of the questions to see if there are additional questions that we want to have or some that we would want to omit that don't make sense for us. And they'll be doing more street data, collecting where it matters, which is at their school level and in the classroom level, and getting that kind of feedback. And so we're excited to see what that looks like and how we can present that to you, because it's a different way of thinking about evidence of how do we know that we're making a difference. It doesn't always come out through a single data point on a survey or a number of questions. It comes up maybe in another realm. And so we're excited to think about how we might collect that student voice and agency and bring that to you so that you'll know whether or not we're making a difference in some of the things that we're trying.
Sorry, I broke my own protocol because I was going to listen to all 5 of you, and so I apologize, Director Watson. So go ahead and finish your thought, and then Dr. Watson, and then we'll jump in. Sorry about that. My apologies.
Well, so I understand there's going to be a multitude of ways that we're going to measure, and since it is there and we're leveraging that tool, I would love to make sure that we are capturing as much as possible in that space. And the other part is, I think, and I appreciate that you are not doing an opt-in, but 100% engagement in the safety protocol. I think that's a great move on our part, and kudos to you on that.
Wow. So I was going to say one of the things is this emergency preparedness, which is something that had like literally worried me since I've moved to this earthquake-prone area, and I have spent like countless hours, I would say, really, in the sheds at Stevenson and International, trying to help the principals. Well, I wasn't at all, but inventory the stuff and see it's all volunteer effort, trying to get the stuff. Do we have a binder where the attendance person has like printed out something for each kid in case they have to be signed out? Do we have a little tent to put up in case it's like raining and when people are signing kids out? How are we handling this? How are we handling that? I have been so stressed over this. I went and took CERT training from the Redmond Police Department because I thought I had to save International School. So I am so glad to turn it over to the professionals. I went to the full day training with Doug James' group, and I felt really good about it, but I also felt bad because I knew not everybody was there. And I just feel like what happens if the earthquake happens and the one person who was trained is like off campus that day? So I just can't express what a relief it is to see this going. And it's also an example about how you see a problem, because I will say this is one of the motivations for me to actually join the school board. You see a problem and you kind of chip at it, and we finally kind of get there. So, it does take patience with a system this big, but I am grateful. And then I'll also say for the curriculum, I'm also very appreciative about the work that's being done in curriculum. And I think I'd like to see a little more as board members. Now, I know Eva put together a chart, and it had like a year ago or something, it had all the different types of curriculum, and it was kind of overwhelming. And I'm thinking, And I've also been given access over the years. I don't know if I'm supposed to have it or if we all have it. I can get in those OneNotes, those master OneNotes, and I've been in there recently looking at different lessons and stuff. But I was thinking maybe just like something more for like general interest. Like you can go online and look at Haggerty videos, and they're really inspiring about like, I like to see the nitty gritty sometimes, like how this is going to actually work. And then I'm also wondering about, so this math program that we're talking about illustrative math, because if we are, I know something about that. I've seen that. And then, so I guess what I'm thinking is maybe just slightly more pointed mini lessons so that we all, especially, well, we're going to have a new board kind of, and just so that we can kind of, we don't have to know like every corner. Like I don't need to read the aviation program manuals, but just some of the things that most kids are going to be exposed to. Kind of have like little mini lessons on them. We did that once in a workshop.
I'm going to just try to enable our superintendent to either, I see Director Chu's hand is up again, so I don't know if you want to kind of get any final thought and then take some, like give a high level reply or how you want to do this,
Sure.
but
If it's
turn
short,
it over to you.
Yeah, Director Chu, if it's short, go ahead and just chime in, and then I'm going to say some stuff.
Super short, related to something that was said by, I think, Jane, the measures that will be used for assessing the students. I love that you're going to look at measures from the student agency. Great to see multiple stakeholders being measured. It would be super helpful, and it's fine to use what I guess we're going to start calling street data, and qualitative, not all quantitative data. Consider using the staff survey to ask a particular question, but I think getting tight about the measures that we will use by September, October for each stakeholder group on that would be super helpful, because having the sense of belonging and sense of connectedness measures was really very focusing and give direction, not just conceptual ideas to people. And so even I'd just like to encourage you to come up with specific ideas in that and present those sooner than later. That's it.
Thanks. Okay, thank you. A couple thoughts, and then anybody, if anyone wants to chime in, feel free. Okay. Couple things, lobby guard. So I know I have been that person, I think, as a superintendent, where I've just kind of walked by and wave at the front office and just walk into the building, and that's bad. So I think one of the messages that we can have to our schools is, even if it's the superintendent or a school board director, you have to make sure that they sign in on lobby guard. So, and there's ways that we can kind of just check and make sure, and we're supporting our front office staff to do that. So thank you for that. I think I just want to make a comment about emergency preparedness, and I don't know, Melissa, you can also chime in on this because we've kind of talked about this, but I mean, Bellevue does it the best. Like what in a previous district that I've worked in, like the supply shed was by volunteers or local churches. Like that, it depended on who you could find. And sometimes you'd have water in your supply shed, but it'd be like 3 or 4 years old. But literally, I mean, can you just say, I mean, Doug and their team.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity.
We do have cans of water and they last 25 years and they're not plastic bottle. I just wanted to say
We do
that.
have that. We do have those in our emergency supplies.
That's how good they are.
I
Oh,
would,
yeah. Okay.
I would like to just say, when I joined this district, the safety and security department was about protecting property. And we made a significant change 9 years ago when we decided to protect human life and people first. And Doug and his team have pushed that focus a very long way. We're very active with FEMA and others. Our team gets called on all the time to talk with other districts about what we're doing and what we've put in place, and sharing with them various tools that we have, and the things that we are training our staff on, like bleeding control. We have bleed control kits all over our buildings now, and they're using them not only potentially in school buildings, but in their personal lives as well, to save lives of people. And so I'm really grateful to that team and how far they have pushed this and the work that they're doing.
Okay, I heard the buzzer. My last kind of lightning round, 5 things I want to say. One is we can communicate with the kids that this is the year for us to listen to them, especially as we design the future of the district. So I think that's a really great thing for us to do, and we can make sure that the kids know that this is the year that we are going to lean in and listen to them. Number two, I think around the word transform and being specific about what that means. We're going to look at the high quality instruction policy. Like, this is an opportunity for kids to tell us from their eyes what is high quality instruction. So I think we can do that. And then at the same time, Danielson is rolling out a new kind of evaluative tool, and they worked with Glenn Singleton to bring racial equity and kind of high quality instruction together. And it literally is all about, when you elevate student voice in your classroom, that is like what you're achieving for all of your kids. So, but we can be crisp around when we say transform, like there is something that we're actually building towards together. Number three, around consolidation, we will be very clear about kind of the timeline and the impacts, kind of direct and peripheral. I'm using kind of the superintendent search as the model of, like, these are the dates way ahead. These are the decisions, and by this date, you're going to hear this update. You're going to hear this. The website is going to be super clear about, updated information, including kind of other decisions that might be impacted. Like, if we do consolidate a middle school, what is going to happen to that? People that are whose kids go to international are wondering what's going to happen. So we can be more clear about that and transparent. I think around highlighting specific things, and like in the annual plan, or things that we're learning, or getting specific about like Hegarty. I think the best thing that we can do is, when we do our school visits this year, 1 per month, we can take every opportunity to kind of lean in on a part of the annual plan. So if we go to like Sammamish, we can look through some of the manuals too, for the aviation class if we wanted to. But if we're going to visit a couple of elementary schools, and so we can use that opportunity to kind of look at Hegarty in action, look at the Hegarty data. There's specific things, like the school visits can be tied to the actual things that we're learning, including asking teachers, what are you hearing from your kids? So what are we learning from listening to our kids? So the school visits, I think, can be really fun in that way, and powerful for us. And then the last thing I'll mention is, our two chiefs of schools are, they're really leading the work around street data and finding ways to listen to kids, capture what kids are saying, and then how to measure that. And so I think what we can do is we can get clearer about how we measure it into the fall. I don't know about September, October. I think what we can do is we'll just continue to try to get more and more crisp around what the measures can be, because I do agree that if we have really good measures, we could really push the system in the right direction. So we'll continue to work on that and then share that with you. Okay. Yeah.
I have one more question, or a suggestion. The street data, as you're collecting or as our staff is brainstorming and coming up ways to engage and collect those data, are you creating a pathway so that they could share those great ideas, so we use less energy in that space? So not every building and every cohort is doing their own work separately, but that we're cross.
Well, we haven't really figured that out, have we?
One of the things we're talking about, we have monthly professional learning opportunities for our certificated administrators. One of the things we're thinking about is using that time as opportunities for school leaders to bring their street data and share what they're learning, share their stories. And one of the principles of street data is an emphasis on making learning public for students, but also giving school leaders opportunities to make their learning public. So that is how you bring the street data together, tell the stories, leverage it to improve instruction. That's a big part of what we're working on this year.
Thank you. Just don't want, one of the things that we've heard over the past year is a lot of additional goals and a lot of, just a lot more work that they're constantly being asked. And so if we could leverage each other so that everybody does a little part, but then share, I think it would simplify.
Yeah, that's the last comment I'll make, and I know we're running out of time, and I'm the one, I do say, like, let's try to end on time, and then I keep going. But the last thing I'll just say about that is, we're taking our cue from the teachers. So like I've mentioned this before, but like our Newport High School, there's a PLC of teachers that are working together to collect like what are kids saying about how we can improve our instruction. And so this is something that we are not wanting to do to the teachers, but we're literally trying to elevate the teachers who are doing this the best. And so at the Leadership Institute, the second day was teachers like talking about how they've done this in their practice. And so, okay, thanks. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate the feedback.
This was great. We're going to move now to board business. I think I turn to you, Dr. Aramaki, to perhaps tee things up for Deputy Superintendent DeVita to give us an overview of the budget. I just want to make sure we do have a little time because we're going to have, even though we had a discussion on Monday and in a week and 2 weeks ago, I want to make sure we do have any illuminating comments or clarifying questions. I think many of us have had them, you've answered them, and we want to just make sure we can share with the community what we've learned so that as we go to 7.2, we are clear. Okay, so with that, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just going to go ahead and turn it directly over to Melissa DeVita, our Deputy Superintendent.
Thank you. Can you put up the slides, please? I only have about 4 slides. They're pretty quick. Next one, please. I just wanted to share with you what we're actually asking you to vote on tonight. So we'll be asking you to vote on a resolution tonight for the 23-24 budget. And for clarity, you are voting on the maximum amount that the district can spend from each of 5 funds during the 23-24 school year. The 5 funds under consideration are listed on the slide above, and I would like to remind you that these funds can be looked at as separate accounts with designated purposes that are restricted by state law. For example, we cannot pay for day-to-day operations, including salaries and benefits of educators, with funds from the Capital Project Fund. We are also asking you to approve the 4-year budget forecast and the 4-year enrollment forecast. Each of these items are updated annually, and so you can think of this as a rolling forecast, and it will change then next year when we present the budget at that time, when we have more realistic data available for the 23-24 school year. Next slide. I also just wanted to remind you of really the headlines from this budget, that we did reduce expenditures by $24.7 million with minimal impact to services for students and staff reductions. A significant portion of those savings, in fact, $6.5 million, was driven by right-sizing the district and consolidating 2 elementary schools. This decision will have an ongoing impact and savings for the district. Other reductions were kept away from the schools and rather were focused on central office and operational supports. And the budget really continued to reflect our priorities, including mental health supports, academic innovations, and supporting a broad diversity of student programming. The actual amounts of money to be spent from each of the funds over the upcoming fiscal year are above. We did balance the budget for the general fund this year. How much we are expect to receive in income versus how much we're expecting to spend are less than $1 million apart. If at any point that we believe that these funds are not adequate, we are required to come back to the board and ask the board to vote on a resolution to increase this maximum amount. As we look ahead, we are not out of the woods yet in terms of continuing reductions. These projections are really built on 2 different basic assumptions. One is what our annual enrollment will be, and we are looking at continuing to lose students. Dr. Aramaki presented to you earlier a look at how our student enrollment by grade level is looking today, with 1,600 students on average at the high school level and only 1,200 at the elementary level. So every year as we graduate 1,600 students and bring in 1,200, we anticipate losing about 400 students. In addition, when we get a cost of living increase from the state, it does not cover the cost of providing that same cost of living increase to our staff, because we do fund staff out of our local levy dollars, and not all our funding is from the state and receives that same increase. Next slide. The last thing I would just like to say is that our budget is based on a series of assumptions that include things like our anticipated enrollment, the needs of the students that will be attending our district, the number of staff members necessary to serve those students and their needs, and the cost of items in the upcoming year. During the course of the year, these assumptions will prove to be either true or false, and it will require adjustments to be made in our spending plans as necessary. The adjustments are made that are in line with the principles on which the budget was built, which is really students and their needs at the center, as well as the strategic direction and annual plan that has been agreed upon by our board and our district leaders. If these adjustments are significant, we will come back to the board to inform them and consult with them. And if they will increase our spending beyond what the board approves tonight, then we will have to come back to the board and ask them to vote on anything that we are asking for at that time. My last slide, next slide, is just a requirement that we show you this. It's in state law that while we are getting an MSOC allocation of almost 28 million from the state, we are spending that on MSOCs, and in fact, even a bit more. With that, I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Director Chu.
Quick point of clarification. As I read it on your slide, you said that we are voting, and I think you said to approve the forecasts for the next couple of years, but that's not what we're voting on the resolution. The way that I read it, we're just acknowledging that we have received forecasts, that we understand the picture, and that we're approving this budget with that understanding in place. Is that correct?
That is correct. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to, like, the
I think
board
that's a
is
good call out. Yeah.
I just think that we are not experts, and for me to approve a forecast, I am not a budgeting expert, so I know what I can know, and I can know how to apply a budget to what our values and our goals are. But that, I appreciate having the forecast, and I appreciate Melissa's expertise in generating it. Thank you.
If I can, I think I just want to say you explained really well the other day, and I think it's in slide 1, but for the benefit of the people listening, we're essentially approving the maximum across each of those. You'd have to go back a couple slides, but there were essentially 5 buckets.
Yes.
And based on a projection, you're saying this is the max that I ask you to approve.
Correct.
And that is what we would be approving tonight.
Correct.
And if you were to go beyond that, you'd have to, as you said, come back and get our approval. And I think Director Chu's point is a good one. We can't know the value of your forecast. We can only look and see if, based on the information we have and all the questions we've been asking over the last few weeks, does that make sense? And
correct.
So, okay. I think Director Watson's hand is up next, and then I'll go to Director Aris and come back.
So I have basically 2 sense-making questions and 2 don't make me do math questions, which should be easier. So my first question is the question that arose about hiring during budget cutbacks, because if you saw, like, on our consent agenda, we have these new people coming in, and how does that work? The community's wondering, how does that work when you said you had to consolidate and people might be laid off?
Correct.
So
thank you.
Question number 1.
Yes, thank you. We lose people throughout the spring and summer, and so many of these positions are basically refilling those. So some of them are coaches, some of them are paraeducators, some of them are teachers, psychs, those types of things. And these are positions that have been budgeted where the individual was in that position is no longer with the district, and so we are refilling them to support our students. And
Good.
Dr. Thomas, do you want to add anything to that?
The one thing I would add is the numbers that we're seeing this year are actually more typical of the attrition numbers that we would see pre-pandemic. So roughly, we have about 10% turnover on average each year. So that equates to approximately 260 positions, and we have to fill those positions. Otherwise, we don't serve our students.
Okay. And then my other sense-making question, which I should have caught sooner but didn't, which is on, I feel like you might have explained this before, slide 8. Why the ending fund balance from 2023 year is not the beginning fund balance from 23-24? There's like a $6,000 something difference.
These aren't ending fund balances. This is just the difference for that particular year between the revenues that we receive and the expenditures in the budget. So it's only revenue over under expenditures for the 2023-2024 fiscal year. This does not have ending fund balance on it.
Okay, that's not the slide 8. Slide 8 in the presentation.
Oh, in the previous presentation.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Hold on 1 second.
Yeah, which was.
It's still not the one that's projected.
It's not the one that's projected. It was the one, though, that was in our
budget plans.
You might want to take a screenshot and share it with.
Let me see where we are. Yeah.
Was it the initial? It was the.
I thought it was here, like on this agenda.
No. If you're looking at slide 8 on the previous, it was our initial plan that we anticipated our original budget shortfall to be 31 million.
There you are. You're on there.
Right, so this again does not have the ending fund balance on it. It is what we thought our budget shortfall would be.
Slide 11.
Are you talking about slide 11 now?
Slide 8. Wait, slide 8. It's slide 8. I counted. It does. It has things labeled beginning fund balance and ending fund balance.
Okay, then I'm not looking at
just
right.
up. It's in this. It's right in here with this. Oh man.
You want to just take a screenshot of what you had and send it?
Yeah. Just budget overview. I thought it was in this set of.
Can I make a suggestion that maybe
it's right in there. You just have to back up a slide or two.
So
no?
Can we ask, is it Jess? Would he be the one to go back on what is
right,
up
maybe
there? Scrolling up, is that what you're saying?
Yeah. How'd this happen? Yeah, I'm looking at this thing that I clicked on from tonight's presentation, Board 2023 Budget Overview from August 17th, and it's a file here, and then it's slide 8 of that file. Yeah, they're right there. And yeah, that's what I've been looking at. Just go down to slide 8 here, a little further. All right, there. See how you have beginning fund balance and ending fund balance, and you have the ending fund balance from 22-23 is 27,950, but then the beginning fund balance from 23-24, I'd expect it to be the same number.
Right.
It's not.
So it's not because when we put the budget together, we don't know how we're going to end the year.
Oh, okay.
Right. So we build the budget in the spring and over the summer, and we forecast our ending fund balance. But then when we actually come back and do the new one, we actually know what the actual is.
Okay,
right?
So I would just say we need like a little asterisk or something, because if you're thinking like me, you're like, what happened?
Yeah.
We lost some numbers of thousands or millions of dollars. So
right. So we talked about that
I think you
earlier.
I think you did.
And why we lost them when we looked at what changed.
Yeah.
But it's because we come in with one and then things change over the year.
But when I was just looking at the slides today, I was like, why don't those match?
I'm happy to put an asterisk there.
And then the other one is the two ones that I think are easier, just like you're making me do math. So it's slide 11 right here. And I guess the purpose in this is like if members of the community are looking at this, because I figured it out. But it's just that it would be nice to have like a little more explicit math like shown on here. So you have total available funds, 79 million, whatever, or whatever it is. And then you have end of year, was it 12 million? And so you had to subtract the 67 from way down at the bottom of the slide. So I'd kind of just like to see it 79 minus 67 so that I don't have to think so hard.
Happy to do that.
And I think that would also maybe help the community. And then this very last one on the capital building fund is similar, but even harder, because you have to take the 124,813, and then you subtract the 113. No, you subtract the 11301 from over at the bottom of this chart, and then you come up with 13,512, and you think that doesn't match. And then you read the little fourth bullet that says planned sale of 100 million, and you get there. So I just like the math a little more explicit.
Happy to do that.
But just in case anybody's as confused as I am looking at these.
Yep, happy to do that.
Yeah.
Happy to add that.
Okay, the slide number 10, the material supplies and operational costs, you stated that the state provides the 27,894,973, and then but the total overall is greater by 15 million plus. Can you explain so that the community could understand why?
Yep. MSOC stands for Material Supplies and Operating Costs, and so the majority of basically that is any extra labor that we have, so overtime and that type of thing, and then it's like paper goods, all the goods that we buy, it's services that we buy, like whether it be consulting and those types of things. It's also like gasoline and anything that is not labor or benefits. And the state provides us a certain amount, but it's not enough to cover what our costs are, frankly. So we allocate funds to MSOC funds to our schools so that they can operate our schools on a daily basis. But then we also have to buy like utilities and gas. And so it's just another one of those things that the state does not fully fund when you look at what is really required to run a school district.
Is ours greater just because where we're located?
There is some addition to that. I mean, things are more costly in the Seattle metro area than they are on the eastern side of the state. So there is some of that, but we haven't seen an increase in this in a number of years. And what have gas prices done lately, right? So we have to cover all those things. I have to say that one of the things that helps us is the sustainability of our buildings, because our utility costs are significantly less than other districts with older buildings. And so there's some things that we're doing that help us, but there's also things that just rise, and the state has not kept up with that.
Okay, I just have one real, request for you to clarify. If you, really for the value of others, because I think you have explained this really well to us, but in the slide that I think says Bellevue School District Budget Review, it's slide number 3. It has the school finance and budget basics. If I could just have you, I think you've got it right there. Can you please just take the example that I think people really, they read about and it just strikes them the wrong way when we pay for a demolition of a building, or we pay for, let's say, a school track to get fixed. I think the reflexive response is to believe that that is at variance. It clashes with the notion that we had a budget crisis. Can you please just maybe walk us through one or two of those examples and explain why it's possible to pull from one fund, but why, when we said we had an urgency and we needed to take the action that we did as a board for consolidation, how do those two situations align?
Right. So thank you for that question. So we've had a number of things come up this year. One is providing better storage at Bellevue High School for their sports equipment. Another is the demolition of Puesta del Sol would be another one. The contracts basically that Jack brings to you, those all come out of the capital and tech levy and capital project fund. That money is designated for very specific purposes. It's designated for technology equipment, for electric curriculum, for maintaining our buildings, and then some salary and benefits for those supporting either technical or capital investments. The state will not allow us to use that money to support the ongoing education of our children. So we cannot hire additional staff members. We cannot pay for counselors. We cannot pay for principals. We cannot pay even for accountants, for example, or payroll people. All of those things are considered ongoing expenditures for running the school district. And as such, they have to be paid for out of the general fund. And we are not allowed to transfer monies between these funds except for in some very specific areas that the state has identified. And so when we ask for things around our buildings, we can't use that money for the things, the area where we have our budget crisis. And our budget crisis, when we talk about it, is really in the general fund. It is in the general fund.
Okay, thank you. I think at this time, we will move to item 7.2, and I will ask for a second to my motion to adopt Resolution 2023-19 to approve the proposed budget for the 2023-2024 school year for the Bellevue School District. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none, at this time, I would ask all board directors who would like to vote yes, please do so, and no, if not.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Yes, aye. Okay. All right. Hearing no opposition, the motion carries and the budget is passed.
Thank you so much. And I'd just like to thank our budget staff for all the hard work that they did. Elaine Thompson is here, who is our executive director over finance and budget. I really appreciate her work. So thank you.
Okay, I think I turn this now to item 7.3 to a first reading of our nutrition policy. That's policy 6700. So our executive director Harrison and chief of staff.
Ready to roll. Thank you, President Serafan. Jess and George, if you could put up the clean version, that's great. Make it a little bit bigger so folks can see it. And I'm just gonna, before I jump in here, just remind you, we had a good conversation on Monday about this policy. And the 3 points I want to make is, one is we were supposed to have had a policy that codified some particular things, including our obligation to have a wellness committee and a wellness policy or procedure, number one. Number two, the revisions to this policy were substantively two things. One is really substantive, and that is, if you look at the current policy, all the detail around our nutrition food services program is spelled out in detail in the current policy. So that was the first substantive change. The vast majority of that detail has been pulled out of the policy. And that was something that we recommended a number of years ago, pre-pandemic. And since that time, the WASDA model policy has followed suit, and they have pulled out the technical detail from their model policy and created a companion procedure. So our recommendation is that we do the same. The second substantive change in the policy is that paragraph that begins with line 10 that codifies federal requirement that we have a wellness committee and a policy or procedure that speaks to certain things. So based on some questions that you had on Monday, what we've provided for you in addition to the policy revisions and what you see highlighted for you are the changes since Monday is listed in the agenda as item 11.2 is a draft companion procedure to this policy that outlines the operational detail of the program that you had some questions about on Monday. What's missing from that procedure are things that a wellness committee are required to do, which are things like setting goals for nutrition education and promotion, setting nutrition guidelines that promote student health for all students, and most importantly, in my opinion, periodic measurement on the extent to which the district is in compliance with our procedure. So we've included a draft procedure to show you that kind of operational detail, and we need to get that committee formed to add to that procedure those other missing pieces that take community engagement to get to. So I just wanted to give that as a bit of a preamble and show you where your feedback was honored that you provided on Monday. So again, changes to the policy since Monday are highlighted in yellow. There was a lot of conversation around kind of the wording of that first paragraph, in that some of the language was kind of indirect and wasn't really policy language. So in an effort to address that, the second sentence now says the district requires health and fitness education for all grade levels to enhance student well-being and provide students with nutritious food that meets or exceeds federal nutritional standards. So we got a little more active in the language to clearly specify not only what we're required to do, but what we're actually doing. The language around lunchtime was awkward in that it talked about elementary. So we've gone to a more ubiquitous statement there that all students in all grades are provided with at least 25 minutes of time daily for lunch. Moving on to the next paragraph, that highlighted section, it used to say something like, it was more passive language, but now it's a clear will develop and implement a comprehensive procedures that are in compliance with state and federal requirements. So that was a little more active language. If you could scroll down, please. The next substantive change is right here under this health and fitness section. And again, same thing, much more active, stronger language that indicates that we've, that we bought in, beyond supporting and, and will implement, it now says has implemented a comprehensive health and fitness curriculum consistent with health and fitness standards. And the curriculum will provide opportunities for developmentally appropriate instruction, grades K-12. Students in grades 1 through 8 receive instruction and practice in basic movement, et cetera. And then at the high school level, not, when we intend to or we should, but that we actually do offer a variety of health and fitness classes to meet that 2-credit requirement. So those are the changes to the policy based on your feedback from Monday. We've included the draft procedure to show you what those operational details that exist in the current policy look like, obviously with updated language. And we want to get to work on forming a wellness committee to add the additional language around a program and setting goals and all those kind of things. What we referred to on Monday as the aspirational kind of aspect of the work. So I'll stop there and ask Wendy Wire, our district's nutrition services director, if I've missed anything or anything she may want to add.
Thanks, John. I think the only thing that I will add is just kind of a re-emphasis on the timing. This is a policy that should have been updated in 2017 as part of the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act of 2010. I think we all acknowledged on Monday good intentions with implementation of standards, but we have not actually had it in writing as something that student stores or DECA programs could look back on when we talk about smart snack requirements within schools. So I think our efforts today are to really jumpstart this discussion. We recognize that the policy language, as you have before you, may still need some massaging, but that would be something that could come as part of this wellness committee. But really what we're trying to do right now is separate, as John said, a lot of that language that was in the current policy so that the committee can begin its work on both a policy and accompanying procedure.
Thank you, Wendy. And President Serafin, back to you.
Okay. I would usually go by alpha order, but why don't we go ahead and start with Director Chu? Your hand's up, and then I might follow you, and then we'll just make sure we hit all the board directors. So go ahead.
Great. Thanks. I'm going to give two types of feedback. First piece of feedback, thank you for making some of the changes. I think there's a little additional work that I'd like to see done in terms of what we're saying. Policies should not record history or current status. Policies should, they may have statements in them that help us understand why, like what we support, what our values are, and then they should have clear statements of what it is that we are saying this policy says we should have done. So if we look at just the part right now that's on the screen, the district has implemented, that's not a policy, that's history. The district will provide is policy, that's perfect. Students in grades 1 through 8 receive instruction, that's not a policy, that's a statement of what happens. High school offer a variety of health and fitness classes. Again, that's a statement of what currently happens. So if we could craft this into policy, like forget what the content is, but let's craft policy. There's some similar issues with the language at the top. But if we want to have an enforceable policy that's clear about what we're saying we are committing to do, I think it's important to get that right. Second piece of feedback is around what are we committing to do? So if you could scroll up to the top, it'd be super helpful. We want to make sure that kids are healthy, right? And we're saying that we want to make sure that they are getting health and fitness education and that we're providing nutritious foods. For me, something like provide students with nutritious food. It is, I would be interested, and this might be part of your aspirational piece, but what level of commitment do we have to make sure that every student who attends school in our district has access to nutritious food? And then there are a few other things. Students at all grades are provided with at least 25 minutes of time for daily lunch. Again, that statement is, as written, is just a statement of what is currently happening. It's not a statement of policy. So we should, if we are saying that we want a minimum of 25 minutes, that's fine. For me, the policy would say something more along the lines of every student shall have sufficient time to consume their lunch and be ready to, attend classes accordingly. So I don't know if we want to put 25 minutes, that's fine, but let's make sure it's a policy statement. So I think the aspirational piece maybe is what I'm alluding to at this point, but I think there are a few more values for nutrition, health, and fitness that we actually want to say that we commit to take care of in the policy. And I don't see a lot about what it means to commit to fitness in this policy. So if this is a nutrition, health, and fitness policy, I'd like to see that. And there's somewhere that it says something like we'll make sure every grade level the student will require health and fitness education. I don't think that's how we treat it at high school. So it might average out to every grade level, but I don't think that we require it to happen at every grade level. So let's just make sure that the requirements are what we really want them to be.
Yeah, that's good feedback, Director Chu. Thank you for that. On the policy language, that's really good feedback. And now reflecting on what it actually says specifically around high school, but it also says all grade levels. So that is confusing. Thank you.
So I have some thoughts. I was thinking since Monday about the sort of that tension between the need to align this because it's overdue by 6 years, as well as I think what everybody's referring to as our aspirational standard. And what is it WIR? Is that Wire, sorry. As well as what Ms. Wire was saying tonight. It feels to me like if we keep things on schedule for our second reading and at least ensure that this is aligned with expectations, that's a first step. But we should commit to come back at a date certain this school year meaning that would be a proposal I'd ask our board to consider, like a hard commitment to come back, informed by the wellness committee, but just thinking about the number of times we've done school visits and the number of times that some of the most animated comments have been around food and lunch. I feel like, my favorite was, less math, more snacks. So I just feel like we're talking about student voice. It would be really great to use this as something, one of the many things on which we should engage students, and then actually have them see that potentially the policies revised later this year to actually pull in their feedback. So that could be an aspiration that doesn't just reflect the committee or the board, but also students, because I think in your desire to, respond to us, one thing I saw between lines 7 and 8 was the loss of the word I loved, which was seat time, because that's what we hear every student say, like, thanks, I stood in line for 23 minutes and I had 2 minutes to sit down with my lunch and I couldn't eat it. So I feel like there is a place to make this, I'll call it good enough. So at least to Ms. Weir's point, I said it wrong again, but we can at least ensure that the wellness committee has something to work with now.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we not just sort of say one day we'll come back,
Right.
because we've got another 10 years or something.
No, that's absolutely true. And to that point, those are the kind of things that could, end up the more aspirational things, goals around nutrition education and nutrition and fitness in the procedure. And that is the intent. So thank you for that.
Food does inspire our kids to speak. So if we can listen to them.
They do care about food.
Okay, Director Aris, I think you're ready, and then Director Watson.
I will piggyback on that. I do like the aspirational statement of that we will make sure that our students will have plenty of time to consume their meal. But I would like to have the word seated back in, maybe in the procedure, to make sure that they have the ample, that it's not misunderstood that it's 25 minutes from when they leave the classroom to whatever, but 25 minutes of, I think that could be moved to the procedure, not necessarily in the policy. But I do prefer to have the
Understood. Director Watson?
You're ready? Okay. All right, Director Watson.
Well, I do want to acknowledge that we did work a little bit on that piece of how much seat time there would be. So, but what I wanted to back up and say is this is fascinating to me, because in light of what I was saying earlier about emergency preparedness and how, it's been this evolution of, it's fascinating to me of how you move the ship of the organization. And so this was a federal law signed into law in 2010. It's the Michelle Obama stuff.
Yep.
And WASDA got to it in 2017. And then things happened, like, a global pandemic and other reasonable things. And now it's 2023. And maybe we'll get it passed before 2024, but maybe not. So, wow. But hopefully we haven't in the meantime been starving the kids.
No, and that's a great point, and I appreciate the feedback, and that it would be great to have the second reading, what we bring forward in second reading adopted at that time. It may not be perfect, but we have an opportunity to make it more perfect with the help of a committee. And I do want to make the point that even though our policy is not in compliance and doesn't align with the laws, Wendy and her incredible team are well aware of the regulations and are in full compliance and continue to work towards that. And again, Wendy and her team have soldiered on under incredible conditions and have done an incredible job of providing healthy, nutritious food to our kids, and it keeps on getting better. So kudos to Wendy and her team.
Yeah, I didn't mean that to sound at all like a criticism. It's just an interesting, way things work.
Absolutely.
Okay, I think we move now to item 8, which is director discussion. And
Thank you.
Previously, thank you, Mr. Harrison. As previously discussed, we'll take 5 minutes for that. I think that nets out to a little over a minute each. So Would anybody like to go first? I'll go first. I will say, all I wanted to say was I love the slide that you had of everybody's name on it. And speaking of that, I just want to say a big thank you to somebody who helps us every day. And today's his last day, Jess Albrecht. So he's been great. He comes to all of our school visits. We all want to applaud for him. He's wonderful. We will miss you. You set a high bar. And I think it goes to just how many people make our district run so well. And I think people often don't realize how many players there are who make everything go so well. So to that, thank you for just the thoughtfulness of having everyone's name. And Jess, we're going to miss you. And George, shoes are big, but we know you'll fill them. So thank you. Okay, Director Chu.
Yeah, thanks. Nice words there. And to point something out that really keeps standing out to me, we keep saying during this meeting, you've already answered my question, but for the public, I want, could you please answer this now? And we're all doing that because we think of things. But if we think about it, this meeting is not, the goal of this meeting is not to inform, like if that were our goal, we'd be in deep trouble because we don't have more than, we've got 10 online attendees. So that's awesome. We're glad they're here. We want them to know everything that we can. And many of them carry more information back to others, which is great. We also should think as part of our communications, when part of our web work, about two things. One, what is it that is critical from these meetings that the public needs to be informed about? And how are we going to act sure that that's happening? And two, what does it look like to have an appropriate repository? So people can find documents and not have to know what board meeting something happened at to see if they can find a report from the school district superintendent, whatever. So if those two things can be part of this, that'd be great. And watching our superintendent while I talk right now makes me think they already are. So if so, thank you.
Thank you. I think those are great points. Director Watson, do you want to go next?
Give me a second.
Okay, Director Aris.
Well, I think today I just want to say thank you very much for the presentation and the annual plan as well as the budget. And I think overall the information was more clear, and I think you did a pretty good job of addressing our questions and asked earlier in the year in the way you incorporated also. Thanks.
Director Watson. You're up.
I was just looking for a reference because I happened to be flipping through some of the WASDA manuals the other day for a refresher. And I think somewhere in this one about serving on your local school board, it did talk about using the meetings as some kind of way to communicate with the public. So I was just looking to see if I could find that. But beyond that, I wanted to say, I was able to go to bits of the Leadership Institute, and I was just, so I haven't, we haven't had a board meeting since then. So I was just going to say one thing I found super valuable there was I went to two breakout sessions, and one was for secondary social studies, which was very enlightening. Some project, what do you call it? Yeah, project-based learning around voting and making choices and things like that. But the other one was the mental health for elementary school, and just really detailed information on, how that was going to work. And for me, it was, what did we get from the sacrifices we made with the consolidation to be able to afford that MHAT program? And I know we've talked about it, but just really getting the details I found was super helpful. So I enjoyed the parts of the Leadership Institute I was able to go to.
Okay, thank you. I think with that, we've covered all of the items of our meeting, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.